Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back. Holy gosh, I know. It's crazy uh how many how much we're doing here, but I did want to talk about a couple things. I've shouted out many times to these guys: Game of Thrones, Academy, love those guys, Civilization X, Raw Wrist, uh Emergency Awesomeness. Those are places that I would go to go check out different aspects. Game of Thrones Academy talks about history and philosophy and maybe a few legends. Civilization X has all the great background and history and the little side stories and focus series so that you can get all the little details that maybe you don't catch in the series or if you haven't read the book. The other folks break things down and they're pretty good at catching stuff. So my videos are essentially just, I would say, kind of vanity videos, but I wanted to expand on some ideas or fill in some gaps that may not be discussed in any of the other videos uh, that are out there. So, and people are doing such an awesome job. I might even be talking about things that other people have already talked about. So, pardon me. I don't mean to romp on anybody else's creativity. So, moving right along, I've got other videos out there, and all of these kind of go together in a series about why I'm talking about these things. So in the last one, I talked about Jon Snow and the idea that he wasn't, that he was already dead, so he couldn't die, or he'd already crossed over to the land of the dead and come back. So um, there's a little bit of Jesus and Lazarus and a couple other mythological heroes involved there, and like Achilles. So you can go check that out. And some other ideas, mythology that's represented in the Game of Thrones. And so that's where I want to go now is talk about some other mythology that's pretty apparent in the Game of Thrones. Um, so Azor Ahai, everybody knows about the apocalyptic legends of Westeros and how Azor Ahai came and he helped drive back the others in the Long Night. And he did the same in Yeti. And he came with a sword, the Lightbringer. uh, and basically was a savior. Game of Thrones Academy talked about him in reference to the concept of the Messiah, that he does have some messianic uh, characteristics, and certainly there's a prophecy about uh, the Azor Ahai who'd come before, and he will come again when the time is needed. So there's definitely some messianic concepts there. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in regards to Azor Ahai was Arthurian legend. So if you know anything about the King Arthur legends, and that is that King Arthur was once and future king of Britain. So in this mythology, you know, Arthur saved Britain from the Saxon invasion, and he helped unite many kingdoms into one. Uh, he ruled from Camelot, and he had the Round Table, and you know, his knights, they were all equal. It's an important theory that we need to consider about what might be happening in Game of Thrones. Um, and then he was betrayed, and he was killed in a great battle. Just at the time that he needed Merlin, his advisor. Merlin had disappeared. So there's something we're going to talk about, who Merlin is and who he is in Game of Thrones. And then he was killed, or just before he died, he had one of his men throw Excalibur into a lake or drive it back into a stone, because that's where Arthur got it. So in some legends, Arthur got his sword Excalibur either by the lady in the lake holding it up and he was able to get it from her, or uh, the sword was in a stone and only the true king of England could pull the stone. And in Arthurian legends, King Arthur pulls this sword as a boy. And then he is basically, you know, brought up or trained by Kay and um, Barger. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Trained to be a great knight, etc., etc. And then, yes, later when he's betrayed and he is on the verge of death, he has one of his knights throw it back to the lake or put it back in a stone, and then he's put into a boat and he's ferried off to Avalon, the Isle of Avalon. So, looking at Azor Ahai, I think, although, I kind of go with the Game of Thrones Academy guys that, yeah, there's definitely something messianic about it, that it reflects as much the Arthurian legends, particularly the sword. Because one of the things about the sword, Excalibur, that kind of reminded me of the story of Azor Ahai. So if you know the legend of Azor Ahai in the Game of Thrones, is that he reforged this sword 3 times, and each time he forged it, it took him a little bit longer, making it stronger, of course. And each time he tried to put it into something to cool it, it shattered until the last time when he drove his sword into the heart of Nisa, his beloved wife, and imbued it with her soul, etc., etc. So in in similar mythology or legends that are around the time of the Arthurian legends, there is a legend of Wheland the Blacksmith. And poor Wheland, he was the most awesome blacksmith that could make some seriously awesome weapons. One of the weapons he's accredited with making is, in fact, Excalibur in some legends. So you can look that up. But he's also credited with making some other really famous swords recorded in history. For instance, Charlemagne. Speaking of Arthurian legends, etc. So Charlemagne similarly had a fantastical sword called Joyeuse, or Joy, and this sword was basically unbreakable and almost undefeatable. And if you know the story of Charlemagne, essentially kind of like Azor Ahai, there were all these tribes that were broken, and they were vulnerable, and they were constantly under attack. And several times already, the Muslim hordes had come out of Arabia and into Europe and tried to conquer. And initially, Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer, had driven them back, but it wasn't done yet, and all these tribes remained broken, very much like Westeros. And Charlemagne set about unifying all of these tribes or little mini principalities into one kingdom that eventually became, was over France and Germany. And if you you can look, there's a little what I want to call like a conflict between Germany and France about the Frankish were in fact Germanic people, and so the Germans claim Charlemagne as their king, and France claims him as his. But back to this, he joins all the tribes together, and he creates a gigantic army, and he basically goes into Spain to drive back the Muslim hordes. And of course, part of that is there's a lot of conquering, and he gets gold and tribute and things like that, and makes him pretty freaking wealthy. So that's very similar to Azor Ahai's story. The king, he gets a famous sword, and he drives back the potential doom of Europe. There's also, if you look up Roland, Chanson de Roland, or the Song of Roland, that's a story that's an epic poem, and I dig it. It's totally awesome. But the epic poem of Roland, who's a knight under Charlemagne, and he also has a very famous sword, Durandal. And his sidekick, Oliver, has a famous sword, and I can't remember its name, but all of these swords are supposedly made by Wheland the Blacksmith. Okay, in different legends. It's not all the same, but you can go read. And poor Wheland, though, he was kind of a tragic figure. Speaking of Azor Ahai and his forging of swords and sticking it in his wife's heart. So Wheland the Blacksmith, a king basically captured his wife and his children, and took his wife. The king took his wife as his wife, and he locked Wheland in a forge, chained him there, and said, "You will make me the sword of all swords that will not be broken." and you cannot get out until you do. And until you do, I have your wife. Enjoy. So, Wheland, of course, isn't just a tragic figure that's just locked there until he makes a sword. He is making the sword, and or he's making these weapons, and each time he does, it breaks, and he asks for additional time to make another sword. And as long as he's doing so, he has time to live, because he's pretty sure that he's not going to get set free. He's going to die after he makes a sword. So at one point, the different children of this king come by, and he, for instance, slays the two sons, and then he burns their bodies, and he takes their skulls and he covers them in something, and he makes drinking goblets out of it. I think that's somewhere in the in the Game of Thrones. And then the daughter comes. She wants a ring. He's like, sure, yeah, fine, awesome. Let me make you a freaking ring. And he realizes that that she wants to marry him. She wants to be like his wife. So when he's making the sword, guess what he does with the freaking sword? Well, he kills her with the sword. So, okay, there's Wheland the Smith, and the Arthurian legend, the once and future king, Azor Ahai. So where's Azor Ahai going to get his sword? My guess is somewhere in a stone or lake. I don't know where it is right now. Everybody's talking about Dark Sister, and the Blood Raven went north to the Black Watch, and who knows what happened to Dark Sister. And then there's all these other really famous swords in Westerosi that are very similar to all the legendary swords in Arthurian and Charlemagne legends. So, water, stone. Somebody's pulling it. I think it's Jon Snow that will pull it, but maybe it's Bran. And that's it. And I'm going to talk about Blood Raven and Bran next. So, thank you very much and enjoy.